So we will spend the next hour focusing in on how we can support nonfiction writing in our primary classrooms. My name is Lisa Thomas. I'll be co-presenting today with my colleague, Jen Kelly, and we will guide you through some demonstration lessons, activities, ways we can engage students in nonfiction, also looking at those scaffolded levels of support for writing to, with, and by our students, and using that as a framework to introduce them to different genres of writing and get them practicing and building those skills in writing across genres and across the curriculum. So if you got a pre-workshop handout, you would have seen all of our resources in that available on our Padlet, which is a new thing we're trying this year. Here's a screenshot of what it looks like. So it's got bundles of the resources that we're using today from the left to right across. You can see the handouts, the Zoom link, and then we'll be talking about the performance standards for writing, some other writing tools online, other resources you can get, Heinemann and from POPEY, and then a video we'll wrap up with later on that's really great. We do also have writing resources available on our own website at popey.ca. So you can check that out if you're looking for printables, resources, and things you can use with your early writers. So our outcomes for today, as I referenced, we'll be looking at mini lessons, activities, and routines to help support writing to, with, and by our students in the nonfiction genre. And such a big part of these early writing experiences for students is our important job to help them develop their identity as writers. And we can do that by helping to immerse them in those steps of the writing process, teaching them specific writing behaviors and specific writing strategies that they can use to create a variety of texts. Another thing that we really want to make clear and important through this session and all of our 4 sessions on this after school writing series is the importance and the value of making those connections to mentor texts and using those as inspiration for students to try their own hand at different types of writing. And we'll talk about that through the session today, as well as in the coming weeks. So when we look at the developmental stages of writing, you can see here it builds from left to right, emergent writers, some of those behaviors and abilities that they're able to do. And then it builds as they move on to early writing and transitional to fluent, capable writers. So why is this important? It's good for us to understand how students' writing skills develop along with their brain development and how they learn, so that we can provide that just-in-time instruction and the demonstrations and the modeling and those conversations and think alouds about what good readers and good writers do to help meet them where they are as they move up through these stages of writing ability. And so much of it is repetition and practice and time and opportunity, and also us acting as that competent, strong writer for them to see how we do our writing, how we approach our writing, how we think about it, how we come back and edit and make our writing better and refine and tweak it and add in detail and great descriptive language, all of those things that we want to be having our students do. It's so important that we show them what that looks like as an example and a mentor in the classroom. And the research on what we know about writing development informs what we know that students need. And it's that explicit and sequenced instruction that helps them progress along that learning continuum and continue developing. They also need that critical feedback to help them know what their next steps are and where they can take their writing. So of course, here we don't mean critical feedback as in negative or harsh, just how important and central it is that the feedback is timely and specific and concrete and bite-sized so they're not overwhelmed. We want them to feel successful as writers. So we want to find the things that they're doing well, give them some praise and positive feedback for that, and then give them a tip or specific strategy or path for where they could go next to keep building on their writing. And of course, we're not going to get good at anything without the practice and the time to actually dig in and try it. So we need to make sure that we're giving kids extensive opportunities to write, and not just writing, but writing on topics that they care about. And that's where we get the motivation, the engagement, and the buy-in and the excitement. And that's a transformational piece for our young writers. So when we look at what is nonfiction writing, this is pulled out of the BC Ministry of Education, the performance standards for writing. So in kindergarten, we don't have these writing performance standards because they are in that pre-writing stage and not doing that traditional writing until grade 1. And so in grade 1, when we look at it, what we can categorize as nonfiction is writing from experience. So they're recording information that they've acquired, or they're sharing about their experiences, feelings, even their opinions and things they've observed. So they could be writing about their friends and what makes a good friend. And that writing could look like a drawing with a label or a few little bits of printed text. But it's a record of their experience in whatever way they're able to write. And then as we move into grade 2, it's split into 2 different types of writing. So writing from experience gets sort of rebranded as personal writing. So again, they're expressing connections to their own experiences, ideas, likes, and dislikes. So they could write about, for example, their family. And then writing to communicate ideas and information. This is what we probably is our go-to for when we think about nonfiction writing. So that's informational writing. In grade 2, it's about simple topics or simple procedures. And the one that we always think of, probably for me anyways, it's writing about Canadian animals and tying it to our science and socials curriculum. So that's sort of the most obvious one we think of. And we wanted to highlight today that nonfiction is also about writing from their own experience and their personal writing. So you'll see here in grade 3, it bumps up in complexity a little bit from that grade 2 personal writing to be a variety and that it's clear. So as they develop along the continuum, we have higher expectations for what they're able to write because we have done that repetition of the practice all through grade 2, giving them the time and the opportunity, the modeling, the demonstration to see what good writing looks like for personal writing. So in grade 3, it might look like journal writing about a field trip. Something very common that we would see in lots of our primary classrooms. And then in grade 3, writing to communicate ideas and information. Again, it's a variety, it's clear, and it's easy to follow informational writing and representation. So again, as their abilities expand, we also want to think about offering a variety of formats and ways that they can represent and share how they're communicating those ideas and the information that they've learned. So they might make a book, they might make a report, or write an article, or write a letter. And so what we want them to think about here, a really important part of this writing to communicate ideas and information, or writing to teach others about something, is they need to think who their audience is and what the purpose is. So they have to have that writing hat on, but they also need to flip their perspective and think about what do their readers need to read to be able to understand the topic and what the student is writing. So it makes that really natural tie between reading and writing, and thinks about the importance of purpose for writing and also who our audience is. So going back to that statement in the research that kids need extensive opportunities to write on things they care about, we wanted to start this by having you think of some of your favorite topics, maybe your favorite people, activities, or places, things that you do in your regular day-to-day life, and reflect on that and then share something with us. So we've given some examples and some prompts of categories here. You can feel free to choose one of these or something on your own. What we'd like to do, though, I'll give you a minute of a music timer. Can you come up with a list of 3 to 5 things from your life that you would be keen to write about? With just an hour today, we don't have time for you to actually do the writing about it, but we're brainstorming topics. What are some things that we care about, that we're excited about, that we would be happy to do a little bit of writing about at some point? So put some music on as a timer, and by the end of the minute when the music stops, if you can share something, anything, 1, 2, or 3 of your topics in the chat box with us. We'll have a really nice collection of a variety of topics that we can look and see what each other have shared and maybe get some inspiration. Wonderful. So if you were my students in my class, I would definitely document and collect all of your topics. We could have a big list and anchor chart on the wall, but each student could have their own list. And then when we do writing, it's like, hey, what did you write down as those 5 favorite things that you want to talk about? And that's something they can pull out and refer to if they're ever feeling a bit stumped. The flip side of that is if I said, okay, everybody, we're going to do some writing right now. We're going to take 10 minutes and we are all going to write about the same thing. Okay, you ready? We're going to write about mid-century modern furniture. Like a couple of you might be thinking, great, that's really exciting, but I think I would probably lose a lot of you in terms of enthusiasm and engagement, or even maybe it's like, oh, I don't really know much about that, so I don't have much to say. So you can see the power of tying into the things that we care about. It's the exact same for our students. So thinking if we can honor their personalities, their choices, their preferences, and have that be a piece of the buy-in, because then they're all going to be practicing writing. They're all working on those skills and they're doing it with a focus on something that's meaningful and relevant to them. So thank you for those shares, and we will continue on. A really fabulous book that we just found in the last year or so is this one. You see the title at the bottom there, A Teacher's Guide to Getting Started with Beginning Writers. So this is really, they focus, so Katie Wood Ray and Lisa Cleveland, they're focusing in on a kindergarten or K-1 classes. So it really is for very beginning writers. And what we can do to nurture and support them, it works for all primary students, but it's especially critical at the time when we're first exposing them to that sense that they can be writers. So we want to think about some of this research here, being a predictable daily routine, building up their identity and seeing themselves as writers, even if they're just putting a few marks on the paper or drawing a picture and being able to put down the first letter. So drawing a balloon and writing the letter B to indicate that that's a balloon and label it. We want those children to believe that they are writers too. That is developmentally appropriate, and it is exactly where they should be in kindergarten and early grade 1. So writers make decisions and they take action, and sometimes they even take risks. We want to create that sense of momentum, that it's a forward moving thing. We're conveying information, we're sharing, and we want them to see that they're growing as writers every week and every month through the school year because of all the practice we're doing and because of all the attention that we are dedicating to their time to be able to practice writing. So you want to think about craft and different styles of writing, bringing in mentor texts that represent a wide variety. So fiction, nonfiction, looking at ways we can bring in humor and voice and topic. And really important, building up that identity for us, acting as if our children are capable, competent writers already. So almost like willing it into being and willing them into becoming writers. If they feel they've got a shot at it and there's some positivity and hope and belief in them, their willingness to take risks and try is going to be much bigger than if we're focusing on where they're not at yet and the deficits and all the things they aren't yet doing as writers. So we want to expose them to good writing, talk about what good writers do, and then bring them along that journey with us throughout the year. So important for us, having those beliefs about our young writers can inform, and it will inform, how we shape and design and plan our actions and responses as we support them through the school year. So thinking about them being at promise, thinking about them being full of potential, and they just need us to help guide them along on that journey as writers. So one way we can do that is through bookmaking, which is learning through language and learning about language at the same time. So for any students, especially, this is again is from Katie Wood Ray and Lisa Cleveland's book, where they focus in on K-1 students. They get their kindergartners making books right away. In the States, they go back to school in August. So they start in August having their K students make books. And we'll show you a video later of what that can look like in a K class. So it brings a sense of play to making things. If they're starting right out of the gates thinking they're going to write a book, they're thinking in bigger chunks, they're going to do bigger work and gradually develop that stamina for writing. They're going to be living like writers in the classroom. Everything they write and every book they make becomes a text that them and their peers can read. So the reading-writing connection really gets made clear and explicit. And then they start to understand that process of composition and the decisions that writers have to make. And then also they're getting some experience and exposure to the different genres, purposes for writing, as well as different audiences. So this is where our beliefs as teachers can help inform our students' beliefs, which in turn guides their actions and their buy-in to tackle the really complicated but joyful and fun work of writing. So when we look at getting kids started with bookmaking, this is laid out in the Katie Wood Ray's book again. First, obviously, we need time. So we need to have time for conversations and demonstrations about writing. We need time for students to do the writing and then to be sharing their process. Space in the classroom, kids can decide where they do their best work. They need to own that decision and own their time. Blank books in kindergarten. So lines, having lines on the page for them to write on sets an expectation. For older kids in the higher grades, that can work well. In K1, it might set some students off where they think, well, I don't know how to do anything on the lines, so I can't. And so they don't even start or try. So the blank books is less intimidating and less daunting for our earliest writers. And then tools, crayons, colored pencils, markers, pre-stapled books, ABC charts, all of those scaffolded supports and tools so they can just go with it. And then the other piece is an image of bookmaking. So they know what we're talking about books and showing them so that students know what books look like. They understand that people make books and that a finished book is the result of someone's work. So they took action from their ideas to create something. So Dr. Seuss was a real person, Eric Carle is a real person, Mo Willems is. They're real people who made books. And that's obvious to us, but it's not always obvious to our students. So we want to think about this great quote at the bottom. If children aren't trying to write, they aren't learning to write. So that's where the growth and the magic happens. And looking at time, it's flexible here. What they call it is a writer's meeting. You might call it writer's workshop, or we sometimes call this a mini lesson, which is whole class where we're leading conversations, demonstrations, and inquiries connected to a unit of study. So for us here today, we might be doing a study, an inquiry into nonfiction with a focus on personal writing and writing about our experiences, connections, likes and dislikes, because that's an easy thing for us to talk about, thinking of all you shared about family, friends, pets, and travel. Really easy starting point is to write about things that we love. And then lots of time there for students to do independent work, and then bringing everybody back together to share and reflect. And that's a whole class wrap up again, where our young writers share stories of what the writing process was. So they're not reading their writing to us, but they're talking about what it was like and what they focused on. So that's really focusing them in intentionally on the process and the craft of writing. So they're getting that solidified identity that they are writers, and writers have big jobs to do, and it's important, and they've got some tools in their tool belt. And then we can build their stamina gradually over the year, over the weeks and the months, where we stretch out that independent work time a little bit each day.
We need to consider the importance of modeling writing. And Lisa already talked about this at the beginning of our session today, but so our students get to see the process unfold in front of them. When we're talking about modeling that explicit process with our students, they get to see us in the role of a writer and making those really important decisions. So they get to see the choices that we're making about what we're writing, because we're talking out loud, talking about our choices, about the process as we're working with students. And they also get to see the foundational skills of writing at the same time. So it's a wonderful blend for students to see us as writers talking through the craft, talking through the process, so that they get to know that that they are just on the same processes that we are. So we're there to support them. Now, when we're talking about modeling personal writing, another wonderful thing is that we are also setting up a community of writers in the classroom that we are part of. So we can talk about our personal experiences. We can talk about what makes us special in the community. So we're not only sharing a relationship building experience with our students, but we're sharing that common experience of writing about the classroom. It's not just what we want to write, but we're showing them how they're going to write it and how we are going to write it. And it's the same process. So if you take a look at this example of personal writing, you can see that a lot of thought and care went into this writing. No, our writing should not be perfect and mimic, complexity or really fancy drawings. We want our writing to be accessible to our students. And often when we are writing about those personal experiences that are happening in the classroom, if we talk about shared experiences that our students were taking part in, such as we had show and tell today, Beth brought in her cat, we're telling our students that their personal experience is important and valued in the classroom. And if it was a shared experience, some students, that's an entry point because they might try to then talk about the show and tell where Beth brought in her cat in their own writing. So it's a really important step to offer some kind of scaffolding for our students as we model writing as well. Okay, so your turn. So think of something interesting, funny, personal, strange, exciting that happened in your life recently. Something that you'd be okay sharing a little bit about. And this can be your takeaway for today. This can be your chance to think about something that maybe you want to jump off a interactive of writing or a modeled writing with your students tomorrow with this idea. So some of the possibilities, your possibilities are endless. Lisa was telling me a story, I think you have it in this presentation actually, about the cat that walked into your resort room and started eating your snacks. Was that this one? Or?
I think it might be another one, but yeah.
Okay.
I just checked into a hotel with my girlfriends. We set out a beautiful charcuterie platter and sat down to have a snack. And we opened up the sliding door to the patio to get a bit of fresh air, and an adorable cat ran in, and we were so taken with how cute the cat was that we were startled when it jumped up and tried to take a bite out of our cheese. So it was just like unexpected, funny, interesting, just a small little moment, but a good opportunity for telling a story, a personal piece, and having that be a mentor text that students probably would also find quite funny and be a nice thing to illustrate too. Yeah.
Yes. I was just going to say anything to do with pets is a immediate student interest. Yes, if it was me, I would probably talk about my cat Porto, who's a kitten, and he just experienced snow for the first time a couple of days ago, and it was super funny. Okay, so let's see what you have to say. Take a minute and write 2 or 3 sentences in the chat box about something that you would want to share with your students and do some modeled writing with. Excellent. Okay, I'm going to let you read through those as I continue, but what great ideas to spark interest for your students and connect to your personal life.
Oh, these are great.
Okay. I know. Oh, that's so great. Okay, so thinking about our gradual release of responsibility, kind of moving down from modeling and inviting our students into the writing process by looking at some interactive writing. So with interactive writing, what we're doing is we're writing with students as our co-writers, giving us ideas about what to write, and perhaps, depending on our students' abilities, adding in some words here and there, giving us, remember, Mrs. Kelly, you need to start sentences with a capital, all of those different wonderful things. So we're inviting them into the writing process. We're composing together. This is meant to be more of a shared opportunity before they're writing on their own, so that they get to have that guided practice as we are working together. And we want to really, during this time, notice details of the written language. So we want to invite our students to notice details of the written language. And also we might say, oh, I forgot to put a quotation mark at the end of that sentence or of that talking part. I forgot. But here, I'm going to fix that right now. So moving forward with our students in the interactive writing.
So if we were together in the same room and I had you all on the carpet and you were in that role play as my students, we would do it a little bit differently, because I would have a whiteboard or chart paper or something I could write on to do the actual writing for all of you with my pen. But we're going to have to improvise because we're a large group and we're virtual from all across the province. So it's a bit of an abridged version of us setting it up as adults, but then we'll give you the steps a little bit later for some of the detail on how we would do that with students. So thinking about, I think probably all of us, most of us have been to a party, maybe a birthday party, and they're really fun. And we want to think about, if we were throwing a party, what would be some of the steps we'd need to think about? So let's talk that through. So we'd have a discussion about it. What do we need? Yes, thank you, Kelly. So time and place. When are we going to have the party? Where is it going to be? What are some other things? Food, very important. Who to invite? Our guest list. Are we going to make up invitations? Is there a theme? Thank you. Yes, so the time and the place, who we're inviting, the food, the theme, music, I love it, budget, yes, all of these things. So I might write down this list and have the brainstorm of everything you shared, your wonderful ideas, and then together we would say, okay, what do you think, everybody? What is the first step? And then I would guide them along to see, okay, we need to know when, and the time and the place is the most important, so we can tell people on the invitation. So we're looking at some sequencing and looking at chronological order. We don't throw the party and then decide what we're going to have for food, or throw the party and then decide who to invite. So there's some good conversation happening around that. So we would write the lists out together, as Jen was just mentioning. I might intentionally get a few little bits wrong or leave some things out and nudge the students to catch me if I'm missing something. But I'm writing at a level that's a little bit above what they're able to do independently. So it's that, but I'm providing the support and the guidance and giving them a stretch goal. So we're going to do this together interactively, and then they can go and do their own writing. So it will become a mentor text for them, where we're really digging in and breaking down how to think about it and what are the steps, and working through how a writer thinks and the decisions a writer makes together in a really safe, supportive environment. So if we were actually doing this in my class, you can see those are the 4 bullets here. Going back, rereading often is a really nice thing to do with interactive reading, and then summarizing what the learning was that took place. And the learning might be about the party, and it's also going to be about the writing. So thank you for sharing all your things there. I think we came up with a really nice list of things we need to do for how to throw a party, and we could throw a party anytime and it would be great. So looking at using nonfiction mentor texts, we can use that reading to teach writing. So we want students to understand they can read texts like writers. There's no one way to write, and that books can be co-teachers in our classroom. And we really want to pay attention and notice the details of written language, especially because nonfiction and the text features, the format, the layout, it's so different than fiction. And I think there is some research, but I think a lot of us we're doing read alouds, primarily those tend to be fiction. So if we think about how can we pull a nonfiction mentor text, have it as a read aloud, maybe we don't read the whole thing, maybe we just read a few pages, but we're drawing our students' attention to those nonfiction text features that are quite different than we see in fiction and narrative stories. So in keeping that mindset that we're going to read like writers, because we are going to be teaching others about what we've read. So that informational writing piece, we are writing to communicate information that we know, and maybe we knew it last year, but maybe we know it because we just read this book together. So here's a book on wolves, and this is from Epic, their digital reading collection, and that's linked out in our Padlet. So we can talk about, depending on where your kids are at and what their previous experience and exposure with nonfiction texts, this might be familiar to them already, or you might be introducing it to them for the first time, but focusing in and getting them to see. And those nonfiction text features and nonfiction thinking and critical and creative thinking about books and topics, it's different than fiction. We're not thinking about character and plot and story and setting. We're thinking about things like, what's the information we might expect to read? So you can put some guesses in here and predictions in the chat box before we read the book. I'm sure you'll have some good guesses. So what information might we expect to read about wolves? What categories might that information be sorted into? And what text features will be included in this book? So if your kids have had experience with nonfiction, they know there might be some charts or diagrams, some photos, some labels. There might be a glossary or an index or a table of contents. Now, do we know any vocabulary words already? What do we already know about wolves? Do we have a personal connection? And what's our goal reading this book? And what do you think the author's purpose was as a writer when they wrote this book? So again, we're making a connection and helping students connect as readers and as writers to see and benefit from that reciprocity, and to take a text like this and have that inspire and inform how they can do some writing for their peers to teach each other what they've learned about something like wolves. So you see here, to get them going, if we all to start then went back and wrote about wolves for our first one, we could do this and have a discussion together and do some pre-writing brainstorming and to help the kids remember. So facts, categories, what kind of text features did we see? What were those? Who remembers the 3 vocabulary words that were highlighted different colors? You can enter those into the chat box. Descriptions. I don't think this author made any comparisons, but those are an effective writing tool that we can find in many books. And now that we're writers, what's our purpose? I think we'll skip over this one because I think we've done it a lot. I guided you through it as we read the book, and I did that slowly, hopefully, so you saw those. I don't think we'll take time here. Another thing we can do to offer some support and differentiation to our young writers is to give them a variety of options of formats. So we're all read and we've been studying, we've been doing a deep dive inquiry into wolves or animals of Canada or animals of BC. We've all researched and read about wolves together as that demonstration and modeling to know how to do it. Now I've got 4 different animals. You're going to choose one of the 4 and you're going to do some research and reading so that you can write to share information with others. It doesn't always have to be a report. Doesn't always have to be a lot of paragraphs. So it could be any one of these things: a poster, magazine, picture book, a graphic organizer, a comic strip even. So thinking about how we can give our students a variety of options to meet the needs of where all of our writers are on the continuum. So even in the same class, same grade, they're going to be at a range of different abilities for what they're able to do. Also, if you bring in fine motor, how comfortable they are holding their writing tool, whether that's a pencil or marker or pencil crayon. What are they able to do? And can we give them multiple ways to show what they know? That they don't all have to look the same. They don't all have to be in the same format. Again, offers support, flexibility, and allows the students to personalize and click with something that really resonates with them.
Okay, so as Lisa mentioned, there's lots of different ways that writing formats that we can offer to our students. This is a really interesting one that we can use, a couple of different ways that we can teach other students. I was actually at a conference this summer, and they talked about the power of Teach Tuesday. And every Tuesday there was an opportunity for students in this class to sign up to teach something to the rest of the class. And it was a huge motivator for students. And as we know, when you're going to teach something, you get to know that content very deeply. As well, Hattie's research on visible learning has reciprocal teaching as a very high effect in student learning. So wonderful ways to work with different writing activities that we can use to have our students teach each other. So we're going to finish our workshop today with a wonderful quote from Ruth Cullum. So primary classrooms should be places where there are writing demonstrations and discussions every day. And that was just emphasized in the little clip that we just saw about what comes next and why. They should be places where there's a strong connection between reading and writing as students look to mentor texts as models. So hopefully that was conveyed through our workshop today.